good afternoon to everybody, and I'm happy to be part of this important conversation. Just want to also present some key insights as far as and lessons that we have learned from civic action as far as Ghana's power energy sector is concerned. And just a bit of a background, Ghana discovered oil in 2007, and then we began commercial production by 2010. So we are more like a very we are not that new, but we are also not that old if you compare us to countries like Nigeria and then Angola. But then we have had quite some experience and some at least insights as far as oil and gas is concerned in the country, and how we've been able to utilize the revenues. We have a whole revenue management framework around how revenues are shared to the National Oil Company, how it is also distributed to some are saved to meet future generations, and when others too are placed to stabilize the budget, and others are also pushed into the national budget for some key development actions. So oil and gas is a very critical point, or a very critical sector when in Ghana, and we've been dealing with it for some time. So the moment issues around transition kicks in, then there is that bigger issue as to how the transition is going to affect us as an oil and gas producing country in the sense of the usual communication around stranded assets and so on. So Ghana completed its energy transition framework in 2022 and launched it at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in 2022 November. And one of the key things that the country was focusing on was a very huge dependence on gas. In 2022, there was a huge new conversation around gas becoming a transition fuel. So Ghana also really placed a lot of premium on gas. Ghana's gas is actually from both, we normally utilize it for power generation. About 90% of our gas is being used for power generation, and we source them from domestic sources and also from imports from Nigeria through the West Africa gas pipeline, and also domestic sources from our Jubilee and 10 fields, and then also our Sankofa field is operated by ENI. So we are big on exploring and also big on utilizing and optimizing our domestic gas infrastructure and to produce more gas to meet the recent power demands and also to meet industrialization. So there's that. The transition framework really has a very huge focus on that. But again, we have to deal, our assessment of Ghana's gas market and oil and gas market in general shows that beyond just the rhetoric around how we have put these things on paper, there's a need to deal with regulation, because since 2019, when our oil production peaked, we've begun to reduce, and that is because we've not had maybe significant finds as far as or new explorations and new productions as far as oil and gas is concerned. And currently, our domestic gas and the imports are not able to meet power demand, and so we've had to rely quite a lot on liquid fuels to power some of the plants. So action and what is written on paper or what is written in the documents need to be done well and need to align, especially regarding infrastructure. It's the same thing on gas. We have significant amount of gas that is being flared each and every year, and it is because we don't have enough infrastructure to uptake the gas that is being produced on the Jubilee and then the 10 fields. So the last account we did, we found out that we are flaring gas to the gross tune of about 300 million USD, which could have been very, very much beneficial to our economy and also to enhance power generation as well. And this is because there's the lack of that infrastructure to do that. So our argument has always been that our transition framework should also look at an action that focuses on aligning infrastructure with the decisions that you are making, which when the targets that you decided to set for yourself. Otherwise, we would go back to the general issues around making the targets today, but shifting the targets, in the future when we realize that we've not met the target. And it's just because we didn't plan holistically to ensure that the infrastructure and all of those things would coincide with the targets that we are making. Another bigger issue that we've had to deal with was also the national oil companies decision. I think there's, yeah. Please, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it's the national oil company's decision to provide some investments in Acres field, which generated a lot of issues. The plan was that for Ghana to avoid stranded assets, we needed to do a lot of aggressive exploration. But we believed that the valuation around the field that we're buying, which was to the tune of about 1.6 billion US dollars, which was unappraised, and the kind of valuation that was done wasn't the best, and we had to go a lot of back and forth on getting governments to understand that they are putting themselves into a very huge risk. Eventually, our advocacy around this stalled the process, and eventually ACA relinquished the block, and Ghana had to buy it for $1. So those are some of the assessments that we also have to do, that much as, the transition was bringing up, conversations around aggressive exploration to prevent stranded assets, we also needed to look at the other side on effective valuation, on risk assessments, on corruption and corruption risks, so that we don't put the nation into, a point where we'll be swallowed with a lot of debts for future generations to pay, just in the name of energy transition and the need to phase out fossil fuels and to avoid, stranded assets. So our work and our advocacy led to us to save quite a huge, billions of dollars for the country, which we would have had to secure such investments using loans, but eventually, upon relinquishment of the field, we had to just buy it for $1. That was a huge savings. Again, as far as the energy transition is concerned, we also work to understand that there's a need for governments to see the transition as an opportunity, but not necessarily as a threat. And one of the ways we've been looking at it is to present the various opportunities that governments will be able to use the transition for, because in a lot of discourses, sometimes the transition is classified as the hypocrisy of the West, and the way we term it and the way we discuss it makes it feel like oil and gas rich economies and countries do not stand to gain anything. Meanwhile, you still see other countries in the West, other countries even in the global South, who are doing a lot of things and coming up with technologies to benefit from the economics of the transition. And one of the key things we found was that if you take solar PV generation, for instance, Africa is growing in terms of installation, and the growth is very exponential. But the technologies are largely sourced by imports, and it's a bigger conversation on how Africa can participate along the value chain, facilitating intra-continental trade at the back of the Africa continental free trade area. Unfortunately, the after conversation has not really trickled down to consider, the issues around energy and then the extractive sector. We've not really aligned the energy and extractive sector within the conversation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And it's something that we continue to push. We've been continuing to champion that to really maximize the gains that Africa has and the gains that we can have as far as this transition is concerned. We need to have that unity, and AFTA provides a very important way for us to deal with it. When EU is talking, when Europe is talking, Europe talks together as EU. So there's the EU Green Deal, there's EU this, EU that, and countries align based on what the EU is providing. But it's different from Africa, where countries have their individual frameworks and their frameworks and their initiatives, but that are not largely aligned to the AU or any regional goal, and that kind of alignment is missing. And we believe that for us to benefit largely, the alignment with such regional integration is good. So our research has largely focused on that. We completed a paper in 2022 on how we can focus on our key competencies and ensure an integrated solar PV value chain, leveraging the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We also do a lot of advocacy around these issues, again, around phasing out and also gas commercialization, and then methane emissions reduction. We've been advocating for methane emissions reduction through some of the issues around gas commercialization. And that comes back to my issue on infrastructure and how infrastructure can be aligned with some of these efforts that we have. In Ghana, one of the biggest developments was the construction of our gas processing plant, which actually reduced the extent of gas flaring at the time in 2015. But when we began to produce more gas, and the gas produced went beyond the capacity of the gas processing plant, there were two options: either we re-inject or we flare. And when re-injection is maximized, it gets to a point where companies would have to seek permission and flare. And our flare volumes are increasing, and this is what we could have used to actually power our plants, and then also even think of industrialization at a larger scale. But because we are not able to commercialize and use the gas, it goes out as methane emissions, as CO2 emissions that could also be problematic for us. And also, one of the things that we've also seen that has not, is missing within the whole conversation around the phase out and the energy transition and everything has been the issue of clean cooking for Ghana. One of the things we see in our assessment is that if Ghana really wants to go net zero at a very cheaper cost, clean cooking would be a very huge game changer. Focus has largely been on the use of LPG, which has not really penetrated well, especially in the rural settings and in other peri-urban areas, of course, because of cost and accessibility issues. So we have been advocating largely on how we can use other alternatives that will be more affordable and more accessible, in pushing the concepts of clean cooking. So we've been exploring the use of ethanol-based stoves, which we have seen that from the value chain is more inclusive And when you begin to think through the just transition, it's more inclusive, because then you're able to integrate both skilled and unskilled labor within the production value chains, even from feedstock to the retail of the fuels. So all of these things are huge things that we need to take note of, as far as, we getting to understand what the economics of the energy transition mean to us, and what the social issues around energy transition mean to us, and not just, a bigger conversation of just, fossil fuel phase out, but, and greenhouse gas emissions reduction, but also to begin to consider both social and economic aspects, how livelihoods will not be lost, how poverty can be reduced, through these technologies and innovations that we are having, and so on and so forth. So these are some insights that we have identified, and I'll be available if there are further insights to be given. Thank you very much.